Tony Pasin is the member for Barker in South Australia. How are you, Tony?
I'm well, thanks, Rikki.
You're reporting in from the final sitting day in Canberra. Things seem to have got a bit fractious, maybe a bit tight at the end of the year. Mr Albanese calling Mr Dutton a Boofhead.
Well, look, tempers always fray towards the end of the year. That kind of language is uncalled for. I get a sense around this place over the last couple of weeks that people are very much looking forward to putting a very difficult year behind them. If we thought 2020 was tough, I think your listeners will agree 2021 was just as tough, if not more frustrating.
And then we've got a federal election year next year, and people seem to be using the opportunity to cross the floor and make a point about some things. You weren't tempted to cross the floor yourself at one point?
No, Rikki, I've always thought that the team game, and particularly in politics, is more important. I've made a number of statements about some issues that concern me in recent days, but I think the Prime Minister's got a hard enough job as it is dealing with the pandemic. I don't want to make his job any harder by crossing the floor when we hold a very slim majority on the House of Representatives.
Well, you did at least make some comments, I think, in the last sitting fortnight that might make some people in South Australia's government a little uncomfortable. You made some comments about mandatory vaccination and how appropriate it was to go pushing the way state governments have.
Yeah, effectively, Rikki, my view is that coercion is not consent. We're on a trajectory to get more than 90% of Australians double vaccinated. If we had said that 12 months ago, we would have been very happy to take that as an outcome. Accordingly, I don't think we should be forcing Australians to take the vaccine or lose their job. This is a very important freedom. I'm double vaccinated, but I'm going to stand up for the rights of people who don't wish to take the vaccine to not have to take the vaccine. Part of the reason why I took the vaccine was so that I could allow space for my fellow Australian who didn't want to not have to. And to see these pseudo mandates or mandates by stealth, I think is unnecessary. We've never required this of Australians in terms of vaccines, and to think that we're now mandating effectively at a state government level medical procedures, I think is a fair way down the slippery slope.
Now, you did make some comments as well about, I guess, the South Australian situation regarding fishing on the Coorong and the impact of seals. Are you not terribly happy with the pace of reform on this front from the state government?
Well, I wanted to make it clear, Rikki, that from a federal government perspective, we're perfectly comfortable with the long-nosed fur seal, or New Zealand fur seal as it's sometimes referred, being culled within the Coorong. Whilst it's a protected species in Australian waters and it's a native species, it's actually a introduced species in the Coorong. It doesn't belong there. It's an apex predator. It's found itself a very comfortable home. It's ravaging our fish populations and it's sending fishermen to the wall. I want to see the South Australian government get serious about dealing with these seals in the Coorong, and so I've called on them to allow a cull. Call it a sustainable harvest, call it what you want. The reality is we need a viable Coorong fishery. We don't have one at the moment, and we've got fishermen who not only are working very long hours, barely making a return. I'm very worried about their mental health, and so if we can do something to help them, we can send the long-nosed fur seal back to where it belongs, out into the ocean. I think that would be a great outcome for the community in and around the Coorong and Lower Lakes, but also it'll be a more consistent offering, because we authorise the destruction of close to 400,000 kangaroos a year because they've become overabundant in certain places. I don't understand why we'd be unwilling to allow a similar cull, but in this case for the New Zealand fur seal.
Well, I imagine with the water storages in the shape that they're in and the fresh water coming down the Coorong fishery, I'm no expert, but surely the fish will be bouncing back. Be a shame if those opportunities are cruelled by a species that's not meant to be there.
Well, that's exactly the case, Rikki, and the fishermen I've spoken to are at their wits' end because they no longer can leave their nets in the water for any length of time because they're destroyed by the seals. The seals follow them out to when they collect their nets. They're not looking to eat the fish, they're just being playful, and in being playful they're both wrecking their gear but also wrecking their catch. And it's hard enough, from what I've observed, to fish on the Coorong. To think that you have to deal with large numbers of New Zealand fur seals that just eat a phenomenal amount of fish every day is, as I said, driving fishermen to the wall. They're leaving in their droves, and so unless we kill the long-nosed fur seal, the New Zealand fur seal, unless we apply a culling regime, we won't be eating Coorong mullet. And for me, I'd like to keep eating what I think is one of the best eating fish in Australia.
Now, on to onshore matters. Another species you're concerned about is deer and their impact in the southeast especially. I mean, how severe is this impact becoming on landholders?
It's intensifying, Rikki. 30,000 feral deer is estimated to be in the landscape across the Lamstone coast. They predate on pastures. They prevent people from establishing lucerne in particular. Landowners are having to build exclusionary fences, which cost about $10,000 a kilometre as opposed to normal fencing at $3,000 a kilometre. They're doing environmental damage. They predate on small trees. They ringbark big trees. And on top of everything else, they're a very serious risk to road users because they often jump out in front of vehicles. We really do need to do something about this. The program we're using at the moment is an aerial abatement program, including the use of thermal technology at nights to shoot the deer from helicopters. We've been doing this program for a number of years. We've killed around 12,000. I want to see funding for this program doubled. Increasingly, landholders are willing to participate in the program and allow their properties to be shot. Most recently, I think we had something in the order of 46 private land holdings and 16 parks. We took out 777 feral deer, covered a touch over 111,000 hectares. We need more funding to get on top of this problem because if we don't, good seasons coupled with a reproduction rate will mean that feral deer run out of control in the southeast, which means they'll then migrate to other areas which are already doing, like the Adelaide Hills and mid-north.
Now, when you talk about funding, is this a state-funded program? Does the federal government step in, or should it step in?
Well, we've had a partnership agreement between the federal government and the local Limestone Coast Board for a number of years. What I want to see is the funding for that program more than double. They're currently close to $400,000 that is provided between local landholders and their levies by the Landscape Board and the federal government. That's been a historical position over some time. I want to see that doubled because ultimately, if we can put the helicopter in the air for longer, it's very expensive, but if we can put the helicopter in the air for longer, we can get on top of this problem and manage it for local landholders. There is a lot of work that's done on the ground by landholders, shooting from the ground, but it's nowhere near as effective as the aerial abatement program, particularly given the amount of dense shrubbery and forestry around the Limestone Coast.
Who's the responsible minister we need to be looking at in relation to that?
Susan Lee, I met with her this week. She's making positive soundings, so I'm very hopeful that we'll have an announcement over coming months and in any event before the next program begins.
Well, Tony Pasin, good to finish on that note, an example of where federal funding can hit its target in your local electorate. Thanks for joining us today on Flow.
Pleasure, Rick.